Hey guys, Captain Dylan Hubbard here at Hubbard's Marina with some interesting news. So DOGE has moved into NOAA and there's actually been some trickle-down effects here in our Gulf of Mexico fishery management. Now, Gulf of America is where we fish, but the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council was named by an act of Congress, so thus it's still called that until they are able to reauthorize the Magnuson-Stevens Act and change the name. So we'll get that out of the way firstly. Now, the interesting thing is there's been some layoffs at NOAA, and that trickle-down effect is now having an effect on our fishery in the Gulf. Now, recently, just in the last few days, there's been 15 people that have been let go out of the Southeast Fishery Science Center. Now, the Southeast Fishery Science Center is the science center that's responsible for all of the science for 3 councils. The South Atlantic Council, the Caribbean Council, and the Gulf Council all depend on the Southeast Fishery Science Center for all of the science that drives our stock assessment processes. So currently in the Gulf, when we want to do a stock assessment on, say, red snapper, gag grouper, amberjack, triggerfish, all the species we have a lot of data for that we can do these really in-depth stock assessment processes for, these stock assessments can only happen every 3, maybe 5 years. And once a stock assessment is completed, it takes like a year and a half, almost 2 years for it to walk through the SSC, or the Science and Statistical Committee. And then once it gets through that, it has to go to the council. Then it takes another year and a half or so before it actually becomes ruled. So a lot of times we only get these stock assessments every 3 to 5 years, and it takes 2 or 3 years before we're managing on that stock assessment. Most recently, the gag grouper stock assessment had a terminal year of data of 2019, and we're still using that to manage our gag grouper fishery in 2025. So it's 2025, and we're using science from 6 years ago to manage our gag grouper fishery. And that's not okay, and it's really frustrating. This big layoff, 15 people gone from the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, the news coming out, the estimate coming out of it is it's gonna cut in half the ability of their stock assessment scientists to provide the science and really walk through these assessment processes. So it was taking every 3 to 5 years to do an assessment. Now, if things don't change, it could be every 7 to 10 years we're getting stock assessments. So very big cuts. Very big dramatic team size decrease at the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, and a huge detriment to science in our Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council, Gulf of America Fishery, and South Atlantic and Caribbean too. However, there are some positive things in the works because they could alter the way these stock assessment processes happen. Some of that lift or burden could be shared by some of the state agencies. Like in the Gulf, there's some really state-specific fisheries, really specifically Florida dominates the Gulf in state-specific fisheries. Things like red grouper, gag grouper, lane snapper, hogfish, yellowtails, they're all very Florida-dominant species, meaning Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas don't really catch those species, so some of those stock assessments could potentially move over to the FWC, and the FWC could take care of those federal stock assessments, which could help. Also the council staff could potentially help as well. So there's some things in the works to combat this, but 15 people gone from Southeast Fisheries Science Center and 5 people gone from our Southeast Regional Office over here in St. Pete. That Southeast Regional Office is the local regional office for NOAA Fisheries. So some pretty big cuts there at NOAA Regional Office, and huge cuts for our Southeast Fisheries Science Center down in Miami. So it will be interesting to see how all this plays out, but it could potentially have some short-term detrimental impacts to our stock assessment processes. Right now, deep water grouper, some of our shallow water grouper species, they're in the process of stock assessments. That could get pushed back. We were supposed to get a gag grouper assessment at the end of this year. That could potentially be in trouble, which is really frustrating because, again, we're managing on 2019 data for gag grouper right now. So we really need a stock assessment update and a new stock assessment to hopefully update that fishery status of those gag grouper. But stay tuned for more information. We'll have more coming to you as soon as we know, and we'll keep you up to date on our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to Hubbard's Marine on YouTube, and don't forget, if you're too busy to go fishing, you're just too darn busy.